Bob from Bob's Workshop. In this episode, I'd like to show you 3 parts of one project, all combined into one video. So from start to finish, I'll show you how I took a Plasticville switch tower and cut it in half. The bottom part became a separate project altogether. Today I'm showing you the upper part, the one with all the windows, and I'm using it as a small station at the end of a rail line that will service my alpine resort. Here it is.
A while back at a local train show, I was lucky enough to find these 4 items that will all be future projects here on my channel. The switch tower kit from Plasticville has been around for a long time, and even though it's marketed as both S and O gauge compatible, it's close enough to 1/48 scale to work for me. The original building was split in 2. The bottom half is going to serve as a small office for a parking lot or possibly a gatehouse to a war museum. I'm not quite sure yet, even though I do have a spot for it on my layout. The inspiration for these projects came from this bag of parts, which not only held the walls and sidewalk, but for some reason, 2 roof sections. That's where I got the idea for making 2 buildings from one kit. Using the plastic siding as a guide for my utility knife, it's pretty easy to score a straight line and the corners to then snap each side into upper and lower sections. I'm going to add a little bit of height to each side because I think the roof overhang covers just too much of the windows. It might also help enhance the perceived size of the building to bring it closer to O scale. The Plasticville switch tower is a snap-together kit. So maybe that's part of the reason for the strong diagonal on one side for attaching the steps to the second floor. But I don't need steps anymore, so this has to go. I've used this flat sheet of styrene before, and the molded grooves are a close enough match to the tower's original siding. It serves an even bigger purpose later on, but for that, you'll have to wait and see. Well, at least you didn't have to wait very long. Not only is this material good for patching siding, it's also perfect as boards for a wooden platform. There's a little bit of missing footage here, but you can get the idea that I'm adding a long and narrow extension to the square platform. It's supported by square tubing underneath, and it will match the height of the larger area. Getting all of the legs to be at the same height took a little bit of cutting and sanding, but worked out at the end with no wobbles at all. So here is how I plan to use this structure. It will be some kind of unloading area at the end of a rail line, which hopefully conveys some sort of Austrian Alps kind of vibe. Today I want to paint it, and my first instinct was to make the railings and the window frames white. Most houses around me have white windows, and the railings were already white, which probably accounts for my original thinking. If you look at old wood, it tends to take on a silver or grayish color if it's outside and left unpainted. I'll tone it down just a little bit with another wash of thinned black acrylic craft paint. It looks dark when wet, but it will dry to a lighter tone. My treatment for the roof is pretty similar to that of the deck. I'll bring out some of the shingle's edges by dry brushing with a light gray, and then also tone that down with a wash of black for a more subtle look. I'd like to add a bit more color to the top, so these roof caps will be painted brown. I'll add green also, so that hopefully it takes on the appearance of weathered copper. The green and brown also tie in nicely with the deck and the siding on the building below. For the window frames, I decided to spray them a light gray instead of white. I think the white would have just stood out way too much. this was part of a box for something, which I saved, and I'll cut out a few strips to use as glass in my windows. In the future, I may add some window shades, but for now, I'll just hold this in place with hot glue. My grandparents' house was covered in cedar shingles, and the cool thing about that is that wood will absorb stain at different rates. So some areas end up being lighter and some darker. On an interesting side note, Grandma and Grandpa's house was green too. Did I choose that color subconsciously? Who knows? But now I'm thinking about them, and that's always a good thing. I used my MacBook and a program called Pages to design these graphics. I printed them to white inkjet decal paper and sealed them with a clear matte spray. After I install them to the rooftop signs, I'll add a few washes and some weathering so that they look just a little bit older. In real life, the white areas on the shingles could be from the chalky white paint of the sign's frame, but I prefer to think of them as bird droppings, which is funnier to me on a sign that translates to eagle's nest. In this episode, I'll be adding an LED light to the building and landscaping around the platform. The black area with the track is removable, mainly because I knew that I'd be adding wiring in the future. To run that wiring, I'll remove a strip of the cork road bed to install the wire beneath the track before it goes down through a hole to the eventual power supply. I've marked where I'd like to connect the wires to the track and used a wire wheel to clean the rails before soldering. I'll never run a locomotive on this short piece of track, but an illuminated passenger car might be nice. It's much easier to wire for future possibilities now instead of trying to add it later after the ballast is glued down. Earlier, I used wood glue to attach the cork road bed to the thin plywood. Because that wood is only 1/8 of an inch, I can't use screws to fasten the track, so I'll use wood glue again. Once this is in place, I'll hold it down overnight with a few weights, and then come back for more work tomorrow. At the end of the tracks, on the back side of the building, I'd like to add just a little bit of color. So I'm carving a blocked out area for some grass and a few plants. I've been using a lot of wood glue for this project, and that's mainly because of its strength when dry, but also because of its waterproof qualities when compared to white school glue. The carved styrofoam will not only add some visual interest to the scene, it will also help to lock the platform and building in place. This blue insulation is so nice to work with. It's easy to carve, it's very light, and it's pretty cheap. Instead of a primer, I'm just going to cover everything in a flat black base coat. The black will settle in the recessed areas and any cracks or gaps, and will help with creating shadows and depth after dry brushing. The grass is now hard as a rock, which is important to me because this piece is designed to be a removable section, and I hate when loose ballast or turf fall off and go everywhere. This stuff is going to stay where I put it. I think I mentioned it already, but once wood glue is dry, it's no longer water soluble, which means I'm free to add a wash of green to even out the turf and a wash of black to settle into the recessed areas of the ballast. This is going on the upper level of my cliffside display, which is shaped like a triangle. I'm thinking that even though it's a small area, I'll have it split into 3 sections. There's this platform at one end, and a tunnel, which still needs work, at the other end, and then also there's an in-between area on the back wall, where I think I may add a very shallow building like a restaurant or possibly a mountainside resort hotel.